Students, in today's video, I am going to talk about Katherine Mansfield's short story, A Cup of Tea. But before analyzing the story, I would like to brief you about Katherine Mansfield. She was a famous short story writer and a poet who was born in New Zealand in 1888. And her actual name was Kathleen Mansfield Murray Beauchamp. And Katherine Mansfield is her pen name. She belongs to the modern school of writers, and for your knowledge, I'll just tell you that modern literature has its origin in the late 19th and early 20th centuries and is characterized by a self-conscious break with traditional ways of writing in poetry as well as prose fiction. So when Katherine was 19, she left New Zealand, which was a colony at that time, and settled in England. And there she spent most of her writing life as a writer in England only. Unfortunately, when she was just 34, she died of tuberculosis. So students, this is the brief introduction of the author of the story, A Cup of Tea. I have told you something regarding Katherine Mansfield. And now, as I have told you earlier, while explaining you the literary term short story, that a short story has 6 key elements. Okay, so let's discuss this story, A Cup of Tea, on the basis of those 6 elements. And what are they? They are, number 1, setting, which means social environment, place and time. Then second is plot. This means the sequence of events and actions. Then number 3, character. Usually in short stories we have simple characters. Then the point of view. This means the writer's philosophy or criticism of life. And the narrator's point of view also, like whether it's in first person or in second person or third person. Then the theme of a story. And it is a story's soul. And lastly, we have dialogue. Dialogues should always be to the point and brief because it helps in understanding the character of an individual. So that's why dialogue are also important. So these are the key ingredients of a short story. Students, A Cup of Tea is a modernist style short story, and it was written in 1922 by Katherine. It was first published in The Storyteller, and later in 1923 it appeared in The Dove's Nest and Other Stories. This story is narrated in third person by an unnamed narrator and is set in 1920s London. So the time and place is 1920s and the place is London. Okay, and the narrator's viewpoint is it's in third person. Then if we talk about the characters of the story, there are 2 major characters and 2 minor characters. The main character is Rosemary Fell, a young married woman, very wealthy. And then we have Miss Smith, a young girl but very poor and helpless. Besides these 2 main characters, we have 2 minor characters also. and they are Mr. Philip, Rosemary's husband, and the shopkeeper whom we met at the beginning of the story. Now the plot of the story is simple, and it is interesting to note that a simple item means just like a cup of tea could give rise to an entire narrative. And Catherine was a master storyteller who crafted a narrative or who can write a story surrounding an item or event that initially seems inconsequential but ultimately reveals serious and introspective themes beneath the surface of the story. Now, if we talk about the plot, the exposition of the action, we can say, of the beginning. The story is about Rosemary Fell, and she is a wealthy young married woman. And at the beginning of the story, we meet her while she is in a shopping trip in town. She is on a shopping trip in town, and she goes to Curzon Street to shop at a florist's and in an antique shop. There she examines an expensive jewelry box that she would love to own, but after inquiring about the price, she decides not to purchase it, at least for that day, and she instructs the shopkeeper to keep that box for her. When she was going to the parking, she is approached by a poor young girl, Mrs. Smith. From here, the action rises, the action develops. This young poor girl asks Rosemary for some money because she had none to buy some tea. Rosemary finds this condition unimaginable, and suddenly, inspired by the tales of Dostoevsky that Rosemary has recently read, she drives the girl to her home, determined to show her that dreams do come true and that rich people did have hearts, that fairy mothers do exist. And when at the Fells house, when they reach the home, at the Fells home, the young girl, Miss Smith, is given tea with all the cakes and sandwiches. After having tea, both the women starts a conversation, but at this moment, Rosemary's husband, Mr. Philip, enters. He comes into the bedroom and was surprised to find this girl, this unexpected guest. And he asks Rosemary to come in the library and expresses his disapproval of what she has done. But Rosemary resists dismissing Mrs. Smith. She is not ready to let her go. Then Philip tries another trick, and he plays to Rosemary's jealousy and insecurity by telling her how pretty he thinks Miss Smith is. And this is the climax of the story. After Philip's reaction, Rosemary retrieves some money and she gives that money to that girl and sends her away. Later, Rosemary goes to her husband, who was sitting in the library, and informs him that Miss Smith won't dine with us tonight. She informs him that she has left, and after that she asks about the antique box from the morning which she wants to purchase. And then she arrives at a true concern and she quietly asks Philip, "Am I pretty?" And the story ends with this question. So, this is the plot of the story, which revolves round a simple item, we can say, a cup of tea. The exposition of the action, the rising of the action, we can say, or the development of the action, and the climax. So this is the summary, or we can say the plot of the story. Now, regarding the theme of this story, we can say that there are various themes. And what are they? Number one, the most important one is the story highlights class consciousness. Then it also, another theme, it talks about materialism. Feminism is also there, and the feeling of jealousy and insecurity. So these are the various themes of the story, and tomorrow in the next video we'll discuss about these themes. Till then, thank you.